have to do. And in Romans 12 verse 1 the Bible says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. When the Bible says, I beseech you, God is imploring us, please, by the mercies of God. Do you know, we cannot do it without the mercies of God. By the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifices. Many people don't know how to present their bodies living sacrifices. And in this short series over these next few days, I'm going to show you how you can present your bodies living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. It's a very reasonable request. In this first lecture, I want to look at the DNA and the true cause of disease. You see, God did not mean for anyone to be sick. Have you read the report of the Israelites in the desert for 40 years? No sickness. So what's happening? Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. There's a plastic over my whiteboard marker. Thank you. Do you know Newton's third law of motion is in the Bible? It's in a few places. One is Proverbs 26 verse 2, where it states that the curse causeless shall not come. Thank you. And the other one is found in, I think it's Galatians 6 verse 7, where it says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that he shall also reap. So the question is, why are so many people sick? Now, this little three-letter word should ever be on our lips. We should all be private investigators, because Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. In fact, the disease, the problem, it does not happen without a cause. And in page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, Ellen White advises us, in the case of sickness, the first thing is the cause should be ascertained. That's number one. The cause should be ascertained, because the curse causeless shall not come. You can have 10 people with the same illness, but there can be different things coming together in every case. That's why I believe that everyone should be their own doctor, because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through, and only you know how your body responds or reacts to different things. Some people say, what should I do? I said, try this and see what your body says. And your body might say, this is good. And your body might say, no. Your body might say, it's too much, don't do it as much. See, there's got to be some fine-tuning. Only you can do that fine-tuning. The human body will heal itself. Little two-letter word here, if you give it the right conditions. And that's what I'd like to show you over these next few days, the right conditions. To know how the body heals, we need to know how it works. And to know how it works, we need to go to the CBD of the human body. Do you know what the CBD is? The central business district of the human body is the inside workings of the cell. And we are 100 trillion cells. We've got eye cells, brain cells, skin cells, muscle cells, bone cells, pancreatic cells. And so to know how the body heals, we need to go in there, because that's the workings. That's the workings of the body, is the inside workings of the cell. So let's go way down in there. The Bible says in Hebrews 12 verse 1, wherefore seeing then we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us. Who is the greater cloud of witnesses? It's our family, it's our neighbours, it's our extended family, it's our workmates, it's the people we see once a week. Let's go further out to the other planets. Do you know that we are a spectacle to the other planets? Will they be able to do it? Because what's Satan's claim? That we cannot. Is that right? That we cannot do it. But what are we told? Through Christ. I love the song, through Christ and Christ alone. Yeah. I can do all things through Christ that strengtheneth me. I'm sure we all know that one, Philippians 4:13. What other witnesses are there? We've gone out of our house, we've gone out of our neighbourhood, we've gone out of the planet. Now let's go somewhere else. Let's start again with us and let's go inside. And those cells can almost be likened to the stars of the sky. And your very cells are a witness as to how you're treating them. Now right down in the very nucleus of the cell is the DNA. What is the DNA? It's the genetic code. It determines the colour of our eyes, the colour of our hair, the colour of our skin, whether our hair is curly or straight, whether we're like one man who picked me up from the airport when I went to Tennessee 6 months ago, and he stood up and he just kept going up. He was 6'10". And his son was 6'6". I've got a photo of them and me, and I look like a little girl. It's in the genes. I'm only 5'2.5". It's in my genes. In 1953, Watson and Crick's, two scientists in America, had been able to unravel the DNA. So let's unravel the DNA. Let's pull it out. We have 23 chromosomes from our mother and 23 chromosomes from our father. I have 19 grandchildren now. It's easy when you have 8 children. And 2 aren't producing yet. And you have a look at the grandchildren and, she's got her mother's eyes, she's got her father's legs. We do it with each other, we do it with our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our grandparents, our children. And there's a lot of information in that DNA. In fact, if you were to put all the information that's in the DNA into alphabetical language and put it into paperback books and pile them on top of one another, apparently it'd go to the moon and back quite a few times. I can hardly get my mind around that. In 1953, it made headlines in the newspaper. Secret of life had been discovered. Secret of life had been discovered. That's 64 years ago. Are we any better? What did they mean, the secret of life had been discovered? You see, Watson and Crick's had been able to unravel the DNA. That DNA can't leave, but it actually can be pulled out 2 meters long and it can go back in. They thought that when they were able to unravel the DNA, assess it, they would find the secret of life. They would find the true source of living forever. They would find out how you can actually prevent illness. Well, are we any better? Are people any better? No, they're worse. They're worse. So the secret of life, had it been discovered? They thought it would support evolution. But guess what? Another question arose. Who put the information there in the first place? So the evolutionists, they took a bit of a blow on that one. And we know who put the information there in the first place. Did you know that the Bible says who? Did you know that the Bible talks about the DNA? It's in a psalm, a well-loved psalm. It's Psalm 139. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and my uprising, and understandeth my thought afar off. Thou hast compassed my path, thou art acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word in my tongue, but thou, Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast set me behind and before, and hast laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, it is high, I cannot attain it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I go up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, even the night shall be light about thee. For the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. Surely thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were being fashioned, when there was as yet none of them. Isn't that the DNA? In thy book were all my members written. Inside the very nucleus of the cell, it's all written there, when as yet there was none of them. Do you know God doesn't have to have a very big book? All that has to be in his book is our DNA. And when you consider that we have 100 trillion cells in our body, that's very tiny, isn't it? The next verse says, oh, how precious are thy thoughts towards me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. You ever tried to count the sand? When I awake, I am still with thee. Beautiful psalm. A psalm talking about how God knows our very DNA. I was pregnant 6 times, gave birth to 6 babies. Even when I was about to give birth to my baby, I didn't know what was in there. I didn't have all those scans and things like that. In fact, I had home births. In fact, my 5th child was a bit of a surprise, so I delivered him myself. Well, when they came in, they got a bit of a shock with me sitting there holding the baby's head. Such an incredible experience. I think, oh, why aren't ladies allowed to experience that? Birth is an incredible thing. But our DNA is all coiled up in that little nucleus. And the psalmist that wrote that, he really didn't know what he was writing about, did he? But we today in 2018 who are familiar with the DNA, familiar what it is, familiar how it's the blueprint or the formula that determines how we're remade, we know. Did you know we're constantly being remade? We've got cells every 1 to 2 days. We've got a new skin every month. We've got new bones every 3 months. We've got a new liver under here about every 6 weeks. The cells that line our gastrointestinal tract, they're remade every 3 to 5 days. And we're going to be talking about that in another meeting in more detail. Constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula, according to the blueprint that is in the DNA. Let's have a look at the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, remade every 3 to 5 days. Well, if that is true, how come someone with irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis, how come they don't heal in, let's be generous, 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? I'd like to suggest that it's a very reasonable question. So to answer that question, or to touch on the answer, I want to show you how the new cell is made. Now, do you remember what I said? That DNA cannot leave the nucleus of the cell. And so a photocopy is made. It's called RNA. An RNA is the photocopy of all the information, because I'm going to show you how a new gastrointestinal tract cell is made. So the information is photocopied. It travels down to another part of the cell. Remember what I call this, the CBDs. There's a literal city inside that cell. So this little section is the little factory where the new cell is made, and it's called ribosome. So for purposes of illustration, I'm going to explain it like the building of a brick wall. So we're building a new cell every 3 to 5 days. The first brick goes down, and it's an amino acid. Maybe it's tyrosine. Then the next brick goes down, maybe it's phenylalanine, another amino acid. Then the next brick goes down, maybe it's methionine. Then the next brick goes down, and maybe that's lysine. Can you see what's happening here? Every amino acid clips into the next amino acid like a jigsaw. It's just we are an incredible piece of machinery. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. Well, what about an irritable bowel syndrome cell? How is it made? Well, let me show you. The information is photocopied, which is RNA, comes down to ribosome, where the new cell is going to be made, and the first brick goes down, lysine. It's time for the next brick to go down, but we've got a problem. There's a piece of information missing. Body says, what do we do now? It's not sure what to do. The information on what to put next is not there. And there's a rogue cell, and this rogue cell is always roaming around looking for somewhere to go. It's a rogue cell that the body doesn't recognise. Maybe it's a breakdown from genetically modified foods. Maybe it's a breakdown from damage done by electromagnetic field. Maybe it's a breakdown from chemicals, heavy metals, environmental poisons. It's time for the next cell to go down, methionine. Methionine is there, but where does it fit? The spot where it fits is actually not there. And another problem arises. The person is magnesium deficient. Minerals literally glue us together. And the person's short. So we've got two problems. There's nowhere for this one to go, and there's no glue to stick him together. Now we've got another problem. There's another piece of information missing. And here's another rogue cell roaming around looking for somewhere to go. Can you see the problems that are arising here? It's like the lady that used to make a beautiful cake, and everyone wanted her recipe, and every time she gave the recipe out, she'd leave a vital piece of ingredient out so no one could make her cake. We've got pieces of information missing. It's just not working. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell, Crohn's disease, colitis, gastritis. Can you see why people aren't healing? But aren't there enzymes that are constantly going up and down, healing any problems? Yes, there is. But if the person's not supplying the basic building ingredients to build that enzyme, it's not even there. You see, that DNA is made up of the food we eat. The outside strands is made up of polysaccharides, and polysaccharides simply means many sugars. Everything we eat is made out of many sugars. There was many sugars in that beautiful lunch we had today. Vegetables are made up of polysaccharides, many sugars. The crossword bands is made up of amino acids. And I'm sure there are amino acids everywhere in lunch today. The soup had some tofu in it. That's a breakdown from the protein we eat. And minerals. Minerals glues us together. And I think I just love that first dish. Maybe it was the second dish. I think, is it bok choy, the greens? The greens are the highest in minerals. Vegetables are high in minerals, but your dark green leafy are the very highest. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. And he didn't know what I've just told you. He didn't know about the DNA. But you can see that the food we eat, our body uses to build us up. And when I look in some supermarket trolleys and see the supermarket trolley full of ice cream and biscuits and cakes and Coca-Cola, I think, oh dear, how will their DNA ever be made? No wonder on page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, Ellen White says the only hope of better things on planet Earth is the education of people in the right principles. Because it doesn't tell you on the Coca-Cola bottle, on the ice cream container, on the sugar biscuits, on the chocolate packets. It doesn't tell you that it's going to damage your DNA, does it? No. No. Many are sick through ignorance. So what I'd like to look at now, I'd like to look at what causes the damage in the DNA. As we go through these lectures, I'm going to be looking at nutrition. I'm going to be looking why people are protein deficient, mineral deficient. But what I'd like to look at now is what causes that damage in the DNA. What causes the damage? 92% of DNA damage, the research is showing today, is caused by a mineral deficiency. Now, if you want to pursue investigating this a little bit more, there's an excellent book that you can get. In fact, I think it's one of the best books I've read on nutrition. It's by Dr. Robert Thompson, and it's called The Calcium Lie. Now, Dr. Robert Thompson, he was a GP, and he was getting frustrated because no one was getting better. I wonder how many GPs are having that same frustration, yeah? Because drugs don't cure disease, they just change the form and location of the disease. In a crisis, a drug can save a life, absolutely, but we're talking about day-to-day things. The worst thing a person can possibly do if they've got a cold is have an antibiotic. Now, those antibiotics should be kept for saving lives, not for a sniffle or a sore finger or a sore toe, which unfortunately is happening. I know in the Western world today that doctors are being told to stop prescribing so many antibiotics, because what happens is we're getting some serious illnesses and the antibiotics aren't doing it because the people have become immune to them. Mineral deficiency. So what Dr. Robert Thompson, he was about to get out of medicine. It's a pity, they spent 7 years getting their ticket. It's a long time. He was about to get out of medicine, and he thought, you know, I'm going to have a look at nutrition. Do you know, his eyes were opened. And he says in his book that they learn all this in med school, but he said when you get into private practice, it's as if the blinkers come up and the pharmaceutical companies come in and educate you in the drugs. But he has the figures in his book. And I know in America, in Australia particularly, 50 years ago the soil had more minerals than it has today. In fact, the food today grown in soils is less nutrients. So the soils today have 50% less minerals than they had 50 years ago. So if the soil's deficient, the plant's deficient. And when the plant's deficient in minerals, did you know that's the plant that all the bugs attack? I remember being in my garden with a friend of mine one day, and she said, Barbara, why aren't the white butterfly moths eating holes in your cauliflowers? I said, I don't know. They're not. I actually do know. You see, I feed my soil with compost. It's rich with compost. So my plants are rich in minerals, and when the plant is rich in minerals, do you know the plant produces little chemicals that resist the bugs? Isn't God good? So when you've got mineral deficient soil, you've got mineral deficient plants, and then the farmer sprays the plants to kill the bugs, further depleting the minerals. Then it's picked too soon, and then it's stored too long. There's not much left when the human being gets it. And it's got no flavour, because you see, minerals give vegetables and fruit flavour. Have you ever eaten an apple straight off a tree? A dragon fruit straight off the vine? I mentioned dragon fruit because I just love them. Everything that's coming out of me at the moment's red. The flavour is intense, but you compare that to the same fruit that was picked too early, that was grown in soil that's deficient. There is no flavour. And when there's no flavour, then the person has to put flavour on, and they put what? Tomato sauce and soy sauce and MSG and all that sort of stuff. No wonder we're mineral deficient. Soil's deficient, plant's deficient, human that eats the plant is going to be deficient. But there's more. There are stimulants today that are leaching the nutrients out of the plant, and one of them is sugar. There is nothing wrong with the sugar cane. It's high in minerals. But the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugar cane plant, it doesn't have any minerals. In fact, it has been said that it leaves your body better dressed than when it went in. What does it come out dressed with? Your minerals. Another one that leaches minerals, particularly calcium and magnesium, caffeine. In Australia, we call it Australia's darling. What's a darling? Something they love. I'm shocked at how many guests that come to us are on caffeine. I'm actually not, because I know that this happens. My father passed a week and a half ago. Yes, it is sad, but he was 92. And he lived a good life. So I'm there with my brothers and my sisters. I'm one of 5 children, and my cousins and my aunts and all of that. And they're all drinking coffee. They're all drinking coffee. And we talk about the weather. You know, I'm sitting there drinking water on my peppermint tea. Do they have any right to say, Barbara, you're drinking too much water? And I have no right to say to them, you shouldn't be drinking that coffee. Am I right? I have no right. I have no right at all. Now, if they ask me why I'm not drinking coffee, then I can speak. And if they say, Barbara, I've got osteoporosis, well, maybe then, and if they say to me, have you got any advice? I might say, well, actually, that sugar and that caffeine that you're drinking is leaching out your calcium. But see, if I said that while they're drinking their coffee, we wouldn't be friends anymore, is that right? You know, it's good to study how Jesus worked with people, is that right? He met them where they were. Yep. And he's the King of Heaven. So sugar and caffeine both leach minerals out of the body. So you put that on top of people eating mineral deficient food. Now, there are people today in Australia that just live on fast food. They're not going to have any minerals at all, because your highest mineral foods are your vegetables. So you put that, you put that in the equation, and then you put these two on top. No wonder people aren't healing. There's more. There's alcohol. Alcohol's a toxic poison. It's a killer. And it kills those precious things that we don't want to lose. They're called brain cells. And when you lose a brain cell, say goodbye, because it's never coming back. Did you know that? You look after those brain cells. So alcohol, it leaches minerals as well as damaging. You know, children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that have 2 drinks a week. And unfortunately, some doctors are telling people to have a couple of red wines at night. Is that right? Why would he be saying that? Because guess what he has every night? A couple of red wines. But isn't it high, and isn't red wine got an antioxidant in it? Well, it has. But that's like drinking Roundup because it's 99% water. You see, it does have antioxidants, but it's got a toxic poison in too, and it's got alcohol in it. Children are being born with fetal alcohol syndrome because the parents who were drinking maybe even just a couple of alcohol drinks a week, it's damaged the DNA. You see, not only is sugar leaching minerals, sugar is damaging the DNA. It gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast, and then the corresponding reaction is the dump. And then when the person goes down there and they're a bit tired, what do to pick themselves up? More sugar. Up it goes again. So it's this whiplash is wearing out pancreases. So we've got children being born today with weakened pancreatic genes because of the parents' sugar habits. We had a lady do our program. She came with her little 9-year-old girl. She had type 1 diabetes. The mother was very large. She was almost as wide as she was tall. And as we're sitting there, I consulted with the little girl, and then I consulted with the mother. And the little girl kept saying, "Mum, tell her. And the mother looked a bit embarrassed, and the little girl said, "Mum." And then the little girl looked at me and says, "She eats a bag of lollies a day." The mother looked a little bit embarrassed. Do you call them lollies? Sweets? Sugar sweets? How can I say to that lady, and of course I did not, this is probably the biggest contributing factor to your 9-year-old having diabetes? Because the mother did not realise that eating all of those lollies, that high sugar, weakened the pancreatic gene that she has given to her daughter. There is no need for me to say it, because when she hears the lecture, she hears it. And I say to her, "You are not allowed to beat yourself up about this one. You didn't know. Didn't tell you that on the sugar packet. But today is the first day of the rest of your life, yeah?" You see, God winks at our ignorance. But sorry, after these meetings you won't be ignorant anymore. And that's a good verse to tell to people. And it's found in Acts 17 verse 30, that God winks at our ignorance. And so should we. Caffeine not only leaches minerals out of the body, caffeine also damages the DNA. As you'll find out when we talk about the mind, caffeine causes a disruption in the neurotransmitters in the brain. So you can have a young couple, say you got a young girl, maybe she's 19, 20, and she just got married to her fiance and he's 22, and they have a cup of coffee every morning and he has a Coke in the day and she might have some chocolate. They can give birth to a baby with damaged DNA towards their neurotransmitters in the brain, which means that baby can be prone to attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, autism, because of the parents' caffeine habits. Tobacco. Children are being born today with weakened lungs because of parents' smoking habits. One girl said to me, "Oh, I stopped smoking as soon as I fell pregnant." I said, "Well, I'm very glad you stopped smoking as soon as you're pregnant, because your baby will get more oxygen and the brain cells will develop a little bit better. But the damage was done to the DNA before you fell pregnant." I actually don't say that because what can you do? But I tell you because we need to know this. The fact is, genetics loads the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So even if you've done everything wrong and given some weakened DNA genes to your children, if you start giving the right conditions, the body can revive, the body can strengthen, and the body can heal. I'm so glad when I see young people hearing this information, because really we should start getting our bodies ready 2 years before we conceive. But not many people are given that luxury, are they? In fact, one writer claimed that parents are the genetics engineers of their children. What also causes damage in the DNA is electromagnetic field excess. We are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in our body. It's the excess that causes the damage. I've got a book at home called Backyard Secret Revealed. Now, this lady saw my lectures on YouTube, and she has written a book, and she sent me her book. Now, this is where she bought a house. Well, she didn't buy the house, she bought the land, her and her husband, and they built the house. Here's the house. And they didn't really take much note, but right outside the back fence there were some huge electrical towers. And because you can't see it and you can't really feel it, most people don't see the danger. So underneath these electrical powers there's 500 times the electromagnetic field that is normally on the planet. And they put a swimming pool in. And her 2 teenage children and her husband were at work, uni all day. And she did have work, she owned some shops, but she only visited them occasionally. But she spent a lot of time in the backyard landscaping. And she got some mouldy mulch cheap. Now, this is her body. Let's have a look at it. Number one, she's getting overexposure of electromagnetic field. Number two, it's a chlorinated pool. When the electromagnetic field goes through the chlorinated water, it intensifies it. So we've got that too. And she's got mouldy grain. Can you see what's happening here? This is her body filling up with environmental poisons. She got to the point where her stomach swelled like she was pregnant. She went to the doctor and he said, you must be pregnant. She said, I'm menopause. How could I be pregnant? And she found that whenever she went near Wi-Fi, and that's another thing that happened, a smart meter got put onto their house. Here's another one. And she was always on the phone because she had several businesses, and she did what unfortunately many ladies do. She'd put her phone into her bra. Do you know you can buy a sports bra now with a pocket in it for your phone? So be careful where you put it. So can you see she's got overload of electromagnetic? And what was happening too is they'd go into a restaurant to have a meal, and if the person next to her was on their iPhone, she'd start dry reaching. They'd have to go all around the restaurant and find out where she could sit, where she'd be further away from the electromagnetic field. No one would acknowledge what was happening with this woman. Eventually she found a doctor who was specialising in people being poisoned by electromagnetic field overload. She had to move out of her house. But why, when she went near Wi-Fi, did she start dry reaching and stomach swell? And how come I don't? Because this is probably my body. My body might be about that much full of of environmental poisons. And when one more drop comes in, I don't get overflow. But with her, one more drop would go in and she'd get overflow. Little by little, she detoxed using essential oils, fasting, juicing, and little by little, it took a long time to get that level to come down so that she didn't get that reaction. So point of me mentioning this is, be careful of the excess. Do you know what the research is showing? And there's about 8,000 research papers showing this, but you don't often hear about it. Young girls, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years of age, 15, laptop on the lap. They're finding that fast forward to 15 years later when they're having babies, 47% miscarriage. Because the laptop on their laps as their eggs are developing is interfering with the development of their eggs. They're finding girls that keep their iPhones in their bras are developing breast cancer. A lot of young people that sleep with the phone under their pillows, headaches, migraines, even some cases of brain tumours. So the best thing to do is to turn your Wi-Fi off about 8:30 at night. My brother-in-law gathers all the family's technology and charges it in his office overnight. That is the best thing to do. Now we're staying in little motel type rooms at the moment. Best place to charge your phones is in the bathroom or in the far corner. But if you use your phone as an alarm clock, make sure it's 2 foot from you. 2 foot from you will reduce your exposure by about 3/4. Now that's good news, isn't it? So if it's got to be in your room, have it a little bit away from you. Do you know the Australian Health Department have issued a warning, children should have no exposure to technology under the age of 2. Ideally, not under the age of 5. But I'm on a plane a lot. There'll be a child screaming because I don't want the seatbelt on, then suddenly they'll stop screaming. Why? What have they been given? The iPhone. Mesmerised. Can you see why so many parents do it? But you've not only got exposure to electromagnetic field, and we haven't got time to go through this right now, but we will when we look at the mind, it's also the flashes going into the eyes and how it affects the brain, and the electromagnetic field. In fact, there's scans that have been done to show that the brain starts glowing more so with children than adults, because children's bones aren't as thick and aren't as developed. Scary, isn't it? But not only all of that, you've actually got what is going in. If it's violence, then violence breeds violence in the mind. So be careful of your electromagnetic field exposure. Oh, how I love my iPad. In fact, just before I came here this evening, I quickly WhatsApped my husband and sent him through photos of me diving in the sea this morning. And way over in Australia, he's getting it straight away. And I WhatsApped several of my children beautiful photos of the gardens we looked at yesterday. I enjoy and appreciate technology, but use it to the point where it is not going to harm you. Also, genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods is the result of two different species DNAs being spliced together. What they have done is the DNA of a tomato, DNA of an Atlantic salmon, splice them together in the hope of creating a tomato that'll grow in the snow. But it doesn't. The snow immediately kills it. Now we've got a tomato with 5 centres. And that tomato, when we eat it, it breaks down to molecules that the body does not recognise. They're the crazy molecules that I was drawing before. President Vladimir Putin has passed a law, and this law states that any Russian who grows or sells genetically modified foods is to be considered a terrorist. Did we ever think that had come from Russia? How do you know if something's been genetically modified? Unfortunately, you don't. In Australia and America, Monsanto is so big and so powerful, they win every court case. So it doesn't have to be put on the packet. But if you buy organic, you can be assured 99% that it's not GMO, because if an organic farmer uses genetically modified seed, he loses his organic status. Chemicals. Chemicals are poisons. They damage the DNA, they damage the tissues. We've got to get the chemicals out of our bodies, out of our shampoo, out of our toothpaste, out of our food, out of our laundry cupboard. So what are you going to clean the bathroom with? White vinegar and sodium bicarbonate. That's it. And elbow grease, you know, elbow grease. If it's done often, it doesn't build up. Many people are poisoning themselves and causing themselves to be sick because of what they're eating, what they're washing their hair with, what they're cleaning with. A lady rang me up and she said, my daughter's in university, she got this job cleaning. And she's got really, really sick because the cleaning products are chemicals. She said, what'll she do? I said, well, she can't do that again. She said, but she needs the job. I said, this is what I would do. I would go and see the boss and I would say, excuse me, unfortunately the cleaning products are quite toxic and are making me sick, but I'd like to keep my job. Can I clean the houses with my own cleaning products? And you buy them. Now, no boss will complain about that, will they? Especially if you're a good cleaner. Her daughter was very worried about, she didn't want to lose the job. I said, well, she's not going to have a job if she keeps cleaning with those chemicals. In fact, she's not even going to have a healthy body. And it's quite possible she'll damage her DNA and not even be able to produce children. Can you see that? Anyway, the boss happily let her use her own cleaning products. Actually, the boss paid for the healthy cleaning products. That's good. I have met 2 single mothers in my travels who've become very, very wealthy. They're single mothers, had children, and so they started to just clean people's homes, but using natural products. They call themselves green cleaners. This one girl, she needed the money and she started doing it. I went back a year later and gave meetings in the same town. She said, I actually don't work anymore. I've got 3 ladies working for me now. She said, I can't keep up the demand. You see, there is an awareness. Is this right? There is an awareness. I was in the beautiful gardens that you have in Singapore, and I watched a little DVD. You know, there's a lot of awareness to save the planet. And what's killing our planet is our plastics and our chemicals. Mold. Mold can damage the DNA. This is an area of great ignorance, which is why I've written a whole book on the subject. Self-heal by design, the role of microorganisms in disease. These are all, little by little, breaking down our DNA, which is why people are not healing. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. It's time to, as Ellen White says in Ministry of Healing, page 127, one of my favourite little books, she says the only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. And then a few sentences down, she says, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Cause. What's the cause? And then she says, unhealthful conditions changed. You know what that means? You've got to get out of the mouldy house. I'd rather live in a tent by a creek than in a mouldy house, right? And then wrong habits corrected. And we'll be talking about that, especially when we talk about the mind. And then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. I know I've got a few teachers in the audience, I might have too many S's there. Aren't you glad it's that simple? Notice with the gene theory, people say, oh, it's not me, it's in my genes. I'm 64 and my mother died at 51, a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. So I have strong inherited genes towards rheumatoid arthritis. But you've probably noticed I'm not a cripple, I'm not in a wheelchair, and I'm not dead. I'm so glad that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. So I trust I have given you a lot to think about. And also what to do when you go home. And one of the most important things to do, I think, is to have a good look at the chemicals in the home. And also be mindful of the food that you're eating, that it is organic as much as possible. My time is up. Maybe we've got time for a couple of questions. If there's no questions, that's perfectly all right. We've got pen and paper so we can look at them later. You've got a question?
Yeah, we are living in the city.
You are living in the city?
So we are not living in a perfect environment.
No.
So therefore, a lot of people are using supplements.
Yes.
To complement what they eat and to compensate.
Yes.
What is lacking? What is your view on that?
So a lot of people living in the cities are supplementing with supplements to help. I lived in the Bronx for a few months, which is inner city, New York, and we ate 100% organic because there are shops, supermarkets in America called Trader Joe's, and everything from the soap to the cleaning products to the potatoes to the pasta. I like that. And I was surprised that I was able to eat so well. Now that is New York. And I do understand you might not quite have such shops in Singapore. But when you realise that the pharmaceutical companies, most of things they make are drugs, but they also make vitamins and minerals. What do you think they make them from? They're not fruits and vegetables. So you're far better to spend your money, I believe, on very good quality fruits and vegetables. The more people that ask for organics and buy and demand organics, the more there will be. So I don't take any supplements, but I do grow my own, not everything. And we're not 100% organic, we do the best we can. But I think everyone can even have planter boxes where they grow parsley and coriander, do you call it coriander, or cilantro, and just even your greens, because they are so high in minerals. I think the biggest problem really is coming from these things here, from the stimulants, from the chemicals, from the genetically modified foods, from the moles. So that's why the first thing to do is ascertain the cause. Just check that you're not got exposure to that, and do as much as you can to eat the best quality food. So thank you for your attention. I'd like to say a prayer as we close. Father, thank you so much for this body. Thank you for the Word of God. Thank you for the guidance that you give us. And I pray that you will continue to bless our inquiring minds as we endeavour to live better lives for you. For we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.